So I wanted to kind of go over a bit of a complex build, and its complexity to the point where I don't even know if I fully have all of it nailed down correct, but I think I have it mapped out enough in my head to understand what's going on. So if I get something wrong, forgive me. But it's the Volconus Daggers, and I'm dual wielding them, and it's a wild striker, which adds to the complexity here, and I'll explain that here in a minute. Let's first go over what the daggers do. So you have a physical and elemental dagger that has physical and fire. And for a dagger, you're looking, pretty, excuse me, pretty good amount of physical and elemental damage combined. It's a 500 and some, 400 and some DPS weapon. And with good crit chance, global crit chance even. Then the added aspects is you get 50% chance to bleed an enemy on hit. And then if the enemy is bleeding, you can do up to 100% increased fire damage against bleeding enemies. And if that enemy is ignited, then you do an extra up to 100% increased physical damage with hits. So the theory is you get an enemy bleeding and ignited, and this weapon will basically do double its damage if you have perfect rolls. And then every 8 seconds you gain Avatar of Fire, which is converting half of your physical damage to fire, but you can't do any other damage except for fire. To offset that, the weapon then adds in a 50% of physical damage converted to fire while you have Avatar of Fire. So what happens is when it procs the Avatar of Fire on your weapons every 4 seconds, then what's happening is you're basically becoming full fire for the 4 seconds. And so all your physical is being converted 100% to fire. But you're still getting that physical damage increase because that's happening before the conversions happen. So the game adds up what your total hit would be and then does all the conversions post fact. Now the challenging aspect that adds on top of this is the mechanics of Wild Strike. So Wild Strike always converts 100% of your physical damage to fire, cold, or lightning when you attack. So if we have Avatar of Fire, we've already discussed, we're already full converting to fire. And then, so there's not going to be a conversion happening at that point because there's no physical damage component to it to be converted. We basically just have a Wild Strike hit that's going to have 100% fire damage on it. When Avatar of Fire is not there, then we do have a physical component that can get converted to a cold or lightning damage attack. So at that point, even if it does, and here's where it gets a little shaky, because some places Wild Strike says it converts 100% of the damage, and I'll pull the wiki over here to show you, where it converts all the damage of a random element to a random element when the enemy is struck. Then depends. I'm seeing that what's happening really is you're still getting the Avatar effect. So it's converting to that element because I'm seeing things freeze and shock. So there has to be damage components changing to cold and lightning. And I'm thinking that's happening when I don't have Avatar and I have a physical component. That physical component, as you can see right here, is what's being converted, and the fire damage is not being converted because the physical is not getting changed. From Avatar of Fire. So the idea behind this build is you're almost always doing a high amount of fire damage, especially when you have Avatar, but you're also boosting your physical against the ignited enemies. Now, where it even gets more complex is, technically we'll never ever do a physical hit, because even if we don't have Avatar Fire and we have physical showing up in our tooltips, as soon as we do Wild Strike, whatever physical we have is getting converted to the cold and the lightning damage hit. Or if we're lucky, it's getting converted to fire and we're just stacking the fire on top of it. to go along with the avatar of fire, which takes our hit and makes it 100% fire damage at that point. So we can't ever actually self-impose bleeding ourselves with these daggers. But what we can do to get bleeding is use an Ancestral War Chief. Because the Ancestral War Chief is going to use your main hand weapon to attack with. And then because this weapon has a 50% chance to cause bleeding, everything that he smashes the ground with is going to have a 50% chance to start bleeding. So we're basically going to rely on our War Chief to create the bleeding effect that we need. And so he'll have Avatar of Fire, or he won't, if he even picks that component up, which I think he does. But it's only still at 50% when he does have it. So your bleeds are a little hit and miss. Depending on what kind of boss you're getting, you may or might not, and you'll see that in some footage I'll post later, probably tomorrow. Those in gameplay footage, where I'll be attacking and then the bleed will go off eventually because the Avatar Fire drops off the War Chief and he applies a bleed. And the second that happens, the monster, the enemy just vanishes because we just smashed the heck out of them. So it's a little kind of a gimmicky aspect on getting that bleed applied. But as soon as that bleed is applied by our War Chief, and you could actually do an Ancestral as well, but I'm finding, or a Protector, but I'm finding the War Chief with multiple totems is extremely nice because it gives you 3 totems that you can actually put down. So you can have 3 at the same, and I should be running Val Ancestral Chief so I can pop Val. Just really haven't needed to do that. So you can get 3 going and get a wide area coming, kind of smacking down. Now the other thing that I'll do is run, and I don't have it in this link setup yet, run Ancestral Protector as well. Drop the totem for the War Chiefs, and drop the more damage that they provide, because the War Chief is going to give you 16% more physical damage or melee damage, and then the Protector is going to give you attack speed, so you get to enjoy both of those because you're running multiple totems on both of them. I just need to get that set up. I've been toying around with different totem and options to improve my bleed chance. So we use the totems to generate our bleed. And then what we do is, for our Wild Strike, we boost our melee damage. We give a fire penetration because 90% of the time we're doing 100% fire damage. And even when we're not doing 100% fire damage, we're still only doing fire damage because Avatar of Fire is forcing us into that scenario. As far as our main hit goes. Multi-strike, I toyed around with some different options here. It's not necessarily needed, but it just makes it mapping feel so much more comfortable. And boss fighting, it makes things, if you really want the DPS, you would probably put a Ruthless or a Maim here for a single target where you're just not needing to multi-hit. And then elemental damage with attack skills, and then I'm using Bloodlust because I'm basically knowing that for these weapons to do the damage they need, the opponent needs to be bleeding to begin with, period. And I know I can't, with these weapons, create any bleeding myself no matter what I wanted or how much I want to. I can't create bleeding myself because with the Wild Strike and these daggers, there's just no way to get a physical component to go off. So because I know my bleed's coming from my War Chiefs, I'm running Bloodlust for the more damage multiplier, which is what's causing a ton of damage to happen here. So then for my Flask, just got basically a diamond flask. I'm using this for mapping. The character is only 82 at the moment, so I'm kind of working through mapping and trying to get them to the end game. So I kind of wanted a speed-ish potion. I'll change this to a diamond flask of the order, where you're getting the extra crit chance. Quartz flask for the phasing. and the dodge attacks, and just curse immunity basically, because as long as we have a charge up, we're popping the flask. The flask is removing the curses from the maps. We don't have to worrying about maps with curses on them too much. Just 2 bleed and freeze. Life flash for right now, just for a quick instant recovery. So I got to play with Adziri's Promise or Lion's Roar or Overflowing Chalice to figure out which one was the best. Problem with Adziri's is because of the Avatar of Fire. If we pop it when we don't have Avatar, we pick up just a small amount of chaos because it's basing it off the weapon damage before it's figuring out whether or not it's getting hit against an opponent and what that opponent is bleeding or not bleeding, so the damage bonuses aren't getting applied, at least in the tooltips. Even if it was, it's still a super small amount of chaos damage in our overall scheme of things, just because we're converting so much damage, and even Wild Strike is taking that physical and converting it to some other element, and so we're not gaining a lot from that. Because my first thought was, oh, this is going to be great. It's like doubling up. Because I get the physical and the elemental on top of it. It really doesn't play out well. Surprisingly, with all the mechanics going on, I was really noticing I wasn't getting much DPS bonus out of this. And I was only getting a little bit of chaos. And I was only getting that when I didn't have Avatar of Fire, where all my physical is going away. And then Wild Strike, and because the problem with Avatar is you can't, once it's proccing, you can't do any damage, period, whether it's chaos, physical, or anything at all to it. So all this extra chaos damage gets wiped away when we have Avatar of Fire. So for 4 seconds, it's a great flask. For 4 seconds, it's not. Well, as you can see, even at 22% quality, you only have 4.3 seconds of the flask. So if you time it wrong, you burn through a flash charge and you get 0 increased damage, and you get 0 leech because you're not doing any chaos damage. So not really a great flask for this build as much as it would be. Now if I wasn't wild striking, could it maybe be useful? Not really, no, because as soon as Avatar of Fire triggers, you're still SOL with it. So the Avatar of Fire kind of kills Adziri's Promise Flash for being good. So the next one I thought, well, maybe an Overflowing Chalice, because it's 40% increased damage. It'll help keep my other flask full, which keeping the Diamond Flask running at all times is key. Then I'm like, it's only increased, so I was looking, what else could I do? Lion's Roar, of course. We get the more multiplier. I think it's up to 25% more. Yeah, up to 25% more physical damage. The knockback doesn't apply to us very much as a concern. One, we have multi-strike, so anything within range is going to, within our weapon range. Wild Strike also was changed to include weapon range. So if we come in here in the last patch for it, so you now gain weapon range every 7 levels up to +2. So 21 Wild Strike will have +3 weapon range. So that kind of solves the range issue. And it's Wild Strike, so we're still proccing a fire, a cold, or some kind of elemental hit with that. That's, the lightning's going to arc out, or the cold's going to arc out, those kinds of things. So typically we'll be putting this in. So that kind of covers it a bit on the damage mechanics a little bit for the awkwardness. Now there's a couple other components that we're going to be talking about as well, but I wanted to pop over to path of building to kind of give you an example of what's happening with the damage. So here's our Wild Strike. On the fire hit, you'll see we're basically always going to get kind of this 100% with the fire hit, which is why our damage comes up to be so high here. So we're going to get 134 mil or 1.34 million. And then when we do the lightning hits, you'll see basically you're kind of getting the 100% conversion to lightning, but then Avatar of Fire is kind of kicking in and converting half of it, which is why when we look at our lightning hits, we're at 50% damage. Because what's happening is it's converting it all to lightning, and then Avatar of Fire is kicking in, and that Avatar of Fire is then stripping off half of our lightning damage because of the Avatar of Fire. It'd be nice if, because we were running 2 of them, we would potentially, get 100%, but Avatar of Fire does not stack on top of itself, even if you have multiple instances of it. And the same thing happens with our cold hit, and if we look here on our cold hit, so there's 100% conversion to cold due to Wild Strike, and then Avatar of Fire strips that out basically and does 50% of it as fire. So once again, we're kind of at 50%, and once again, this depends on whether or not we have Avatar of Fire working or not. When we don't, then we're still doing the cold damage is still coming across. So because of all the mechanics, even Path of Building has a hard time explaining how it all works. So, but when we really do lay in with the fire hit and the explosion, which is again another reason multi-strike comes in, we're doing a lot of damage. Like I said, over a million, almost, not quite, probably creep into about 1.5 million with min-maxing. So some of the other places is we're also running Abysses, which for this build is absolutely what you want to run, because you're going to get the crit multiplier, and really the crit multiplier is probably the bigger important thing to run on this. And the reason why we're fine running an Abysses is we have insane invasion going on. So what we're talking about here is, of course, we have 25% chance to evade while we have Onslaught. We have 25 more projectiles, so we're evading there. We're also picking up, let's see here, our acrobats and our phase acrobatics. So we're picking those up. In addition, for our items, we're running Azeri Step, which is another 14% up to I think 16% to dodge spell hits, and then we've running a enchanted boot that has 10% to dodge attacks if you've taken a critical strike lately. So if we do get hit with an attack, then we are getting boosted up there. Then again, we're also running Hanakora's Sight, which gives us another potentially I think 10 and 10. I'm for min-maxing. So that's 10% extra dodge chance for attacks and 10% extra dodge chance for spell hits, and it keeps us from being blinded. We're also running a Stormbrand, a Curse on Hit, and Elemental Weakness. So that's going to give us some elemental weakness, but on our War Chief, we're running Blind Support and Culling Strike. So we're plopping the War Chief down. He's blinding. He'll get a Culling Strike to help with bosses, just knock them off quicker. And he's also applying our Bleed. So we're getting a ton of utility out of our War Chief the second we place him down. Then of course the elemental weakness, because we're always doing basically either fire or cold, because it's or lightning. We never do a physical aspect. This is probably the best. This is the best curse to run, really. You could say that flammability might be a better one because we're doing that more often, and we would drive it. But to me, I think this is probably the choice for those 4 seconds when we don't have Avatar of Fire on us. This still has an effect, whereas when we don't have Avatar of Fire, if Wild Strike's proccing the other ways, then this has no, or this would, but flammability wouldn't have any value. Just a Stygian belt so we can run, an eye for additional life, because getting life on this build's hard. And then gloves just to kind of hang or cover our resist, because obviously we don't have anywhere except for these four locations to get resist, because has no resist, this gear has no resist, our abyssus has no resist, and our boots have no resist. So we really only have these 4 slots to get all of our resist in. Speaking of which, one other thing you could do instead of a Lion's Roar or in combination is run a Wise Oak and then Tri-Cap, all 3 the same, for the most damage opportunities. We're also running a Quartz Flask, which gives us another 10% chance to dodge spells and attacks while we have it up. So when you start stacking all that together, also with our high evasion, if we go back and look here, because we're running Duressos, which is giving us another 6% chance to dodge attack hits, and is giving us endurance charges, and we're basically doubling, or in essence doubling our onslaught effect. So that we're always going to end up having up because of our ascendancies. But if we look at our defensive layers here in Path of Building, so our evasion chance is 95%. And then if we fail evasion, now this is assuming the enemy is blinded. If the enemy is not blinded, I think it's 75%, or 72%. So if the enemy is blinded, we have 95% chance to evade the hit. And then we also have, so if we fail the evasion, then we roll for our block chance, which is 12%. And then I think it's evasion, dodge, then block. So actually we'll try to evade 95%. Then if we fail evasion, then we will try our dodge chance. So we'll have 75% chance to dodge the 5% of attacks that come through. And then if we fail that, we still have 12% because we're dual wielding, to try and block that, or block the attack while dual wielding. So the entire structure is never get hit. When you do get hit, we don't have a whole lot of life, but that's where the double effect coming in from the 2 daggers, when we don't have Avatar of Fire, which this 4,000 armor that we end up getting is reducing our damage reduction by 37%, and we're going to be running with the endurance charges as well. So endurance charges are going to help out with some of that as well, with our elemental overmaxing and a few other pieces there that we'll have from our endurance hits. So that's kind of where our defenses come from. The one thing I might look at doing is giving up some of this node, maybe this acuity node here, in exchange for taking Valpak and these 3 leeches, to see if I can get enough leech going to offset needing that extra kind of flask, so I can run like a Wise Oak or something else. For the tree, what we're basically going to be coming in here for is our evasion in life. Then we're kind of swinging down here to pick up our dual wielding, grabbing some extra life through here, grabbing our frenzy charge that's down here, getting some evasion and resist, picking up the life, getting a jewel slot while we're down here, picking up int. Int's hard to carry on this build. There's just not a lot of int where we're traveling, and where our gear is so locked, our rings, our boots, or our rings, our belt, and our gloves all almost need triple resist or perfect roll resist in combinations. That makes getting in on the gear a little trickier at times. So having in on the tree kind of ends up becoming almost a necessity, unless we were dumping a lot of EX into the build, where we're getting those like perfect fire cold rolls and then stacking in on top of that 3rd suffix aspects. So for our jewel slots, we do take a Watcher's Prismatic, which gives us another 10% chance to dodge attacks while we have Grace. We're also running Grace, which is giving us additional chance to, basically it's giving us 34% chance to dodge attacks when we use the Vow piece. Or we're getting, a tremendous amount of evasion rating to pump that evasion up. So we'll pop Val Grace during a fight, and usually it's over before it's over. But back to the tree. I went in and picked up these mana leech nodes because, like I said, on our boots, we're basically taking Azeres, and we need this extra 10%. I'm thinking, since I have to take a critical hit for it, I might change this out to Leech and see if I can get rid of those mana nodes. Maybe in exchange for the Life Leech nodes. Of course, we're taking Acrobatics and Phase Acrobatics. And then we're basically picking up Crit, Frenzies, Weapon Penetration, Physical Life. Nothing fancy here. One other thing to mention is we do take Adder's Touch, but we're not going to be poisoning because all of our physical is basically always going to be converted. So we're not going to be doing physical damage, and because of the Avatar of Fire, even if we used Azeres Flask, the Avatar of Fires could prevent us from doing the chaos damage component of it. So there's no way to apply the poison for us. However, it still does have a 1 node piece for plus 30% critical strike multiplier, which is what we're picking up for. And then you also have, because the rest of these are good. You get crit chance, crit multiplier, crit chance, crit multiplier, crit chance, multiplier, increased damage with elements, which will include our ignite. We're doing okay damage with ignite, nothing fancy. Even on the firehead, it's only like 8,000 DPS. Nothing to phone home about. Basically just some additional life and crits. Like I said, the only thing I might tweak is converting this and the boots to allow me to pick these 3 nodes up instead. And then Valpack to see if I can get enough leech going to reduce some of the up and down of a fight. For our ascendancies, basically we're going for Avatar Chase and Avatar Slaughter. Personally, I went straight for Avatar Chase because I wanted the onslaught, all that. The Frenzy Charge, I hadn't even got my tree pushed over to get them yet, except for the base 3. So, and really you're only getting 10% attack speed with this node. And then of course the free Frenzy, but you can just run Bloodlust until you get later on to Mercy and pick this node up. From that point, wrap out your Uber Lab for Avatar Slaughter, which basically gives you the extra Frenzy Charge and boosts your Frenzies by 2 or 3% for what they give you. So we're super fast mapping. We clear quick with how Watch Strike works, and I'll show you a quick map run real quick and how that kind of plays. So as you can see, there's a ton of mechanics, a ton of stuff going on. We're also, for the rest of our skill setups, Val Grace, Fortify, Whirling Blades, and faster attacks. That's also another thing. We're running Fortify, so we're basically getting that 20% damage reduction from that as well. Phase run on a increased duration, cast when damage taken, and Immortal Call setup. Reason for this is not so much that you're going to get the move speed or harder to detect piece, but after you perform so basically you're going to trip the phase run, and then as soon as you perform a skill, and of course it's going to suck your frenzy charges, but during that time you're also going to get 22% more physical damage. So we'll have our, I think 5 frenzy charges. This will proc. When it procs, it sucks those down. So we're picking up 2 seconds of 22% more physical damage, and because we're instantly killing everything, we're just get a huge damage boost. And you'll kind of see that happen sometimes. You'll see my Immortal Call pop. you won't even see the phase run happen because I'm attacking. So the second that the phase run component hits, we lose it, but we gain the physical damage increase on top of that. So once again, another complex mechanic to think about, and not really complex on this one, but just something to think on of, oh, we're not getting the move piece or the hidden aspects or visibility. That's all mute. We're not getting any of that, but we are getting and picking up the 22, or I think it was a 25% physical damage aspects. Alright, so let's run a quick map. Nothing too fancy on the map mods. Just to give you a quick presentation, and I also have some yellow elder and guardian fights I'll post as well.
Embraced by mud, loved by roots, the careless.
Pack, just kind of plow through it. If it's yellow, maybe drop our storm call down, or storm brand, I should say. And you can see bosses just kind of melt when we pop everything down real quick. So mapping is pretty quick. It's not the world's fastest thing, but it's not also the slowest thing in the universe either. It's kind of whirling blades between the packs. So as you see, pretty smooth for Syndicate.
If you think I'm good,
We honor the way. Warriors.
I must confess, wise choice indeed.
So anyways, this gives you a quick kind of overview of how the mapping feels. I should have Guardian and Shaper videos up. I'll get the yellow elders and Guardians up here shortly, probably tomorrow. Kind of get those videos posted. How it goes. So, anyways, thanks, and please subscribe and like, and really want to, grow this channel for you guys and come up with some more complex builds. Kind of really deep dive into some of these oddball mechanics and ways to toy around with them. So, let me know what you think in the comments. Later.